If you step very lightly, you will hear the garden remembering the rain. Lily wakes before the sky does, with the hush that lives between midnight and the first silver of morning. She sits for a while at the edge of her bed, one hand curled around the worn cuff of her blanket, listening to the soft, steady music that belongs to her garden. Water, always water, the patient, glassy ripple of fountains and the far-off, steady hush of mist slipping from terrace to terrace. The sound seems to thread itself into her bones, slow and familiar as a heartbeat, and she lets it guide her. A shawl rests on the chair beside her, the same green as the moss steps that lead down from her doorway. She draws it close about her shoulders and breathes in that late-night coolness, which tastes faintly of wet earth and cardamom, like memories folded between leaves. Outside, the Garden of Babylon hangs in the fog as if stitched to the sky. Terraces droop in layers, each one a little world of its own, held up by ropes and ancient beams that creak with contentment. Lanterns, tiny households of light, sway among the vines, their flames blurred by the mist into small, comfortable suns. Fairy blooms glow at intervals along the pathways, bioluminescent as a child's secret, their twinkling like a distant clock that counts the slow hours until dawn. Water runs everywhere, from narrow spouts into little stone basins, from a high, patient fountain that never hurriedly announces itself, from rain caught and released by the leaves. The whole place breathes in that wet air and answers with a sound like a lullaby. Lily moves without hurry. She does not need keys. The gate knows her hands and opens with the soft, welcome creak she has come to love. There is a small bell there, hung with a ribbon of ivy that tinkles gently when the mist brushes it, and that sound is a greeting in itself. Her boots leave damp prints on the stones, slowly dissolving, as if the path were swallowing and then releasing her each step. She tightens her scarf, woven by a neighbor for last winter, threaded with tiny stitches that glint like seeds, wraps her hands round a clay mug of warm tea that a friend left on the step, steam rolling upward in small cloudlets, then leans forward to peer across the terraces. Every plant in the Garden of Babylon has been coaxed into hanging, into leaning over, into offering itself. Trees bend with low-lying fruit that catches lantern light like moonlight trapped in skin. Vines climb and then spill, draping the terraces like curtains, their leaves soft as letters folded closed. Between the terraces lie little sun-boxes, stone ovens warmed by trapped sunlight and garden steam, where food is gently coaxed rather than hurried. The air is a quilt of aromas, wet stone, toasted spice, citrus peel, and the distant, slow perfume of cocoa warmed beneath a canopy of leaves. Lily inhales, and the breaths settle her further into the day. She moves as someone who has made peace with slowness, each motion deliberate, as if she were tracing a hymn with the tips of her fingers. She begins at the topmost terrace, the place everyone in the garden calls the amber-gourd terrace. The name feels right. The gourds there glow as if from within, a constellation of small lanterns shaped like fruit. They hang in loop of braided vine and rope, their skins dappled with sun and the faintest hint of frost. They are heavier than they look, the weight of things grown slowly and kept with care. Lily's hands know them by touch. The little ridges, the slight give when pressed, the way the stem seems to nod when sliced. She moves among them with a reverence that borders on ceremony. The terrace is sheltered. The canopy overhead muffles the world beyond and collects rain in a gentle, repeating rhythm that falls into a stone trough and sings away like coins tossed into a well. The preparation here is simple as a prayer. Lily takes one of the amber gourds down from its vine and rests it on the sun-warmed stone beside a low, flat hearth. The sun-box is constructed of dark stone, gathered from the riverbed and set in a shallow nook where the day's light pools. It is not an oven in the way the city knows an oven. It is a patient collector of warmth. Lily polishes the gourd's skin with a soft cloth, and as she does the scent rises, earthy and sweet, with musks of nutmeg and the bright, warm sting of ginger. She carefully unpins the top like a letter, and a small plume of steam sighs out, carrying with it the quiet perfume of seeds and sugar and some secret herb that Lily keeps pressed between the pages of a seed catalogue like a pressed memory. She spoons a mixture into the hollow. Roasted seeds, a scatter of crushed hazelnuts, a handful of oats toasted in the sun, and a drizzle of honey gathered that very morning from hives that hang like amber pockets from the next terrace down. She thinks about proportion until the filling fits the gourd as if it were returning home. A tightness of goodness that will, by the time the sun has done its work, loosen into a buttery warmth. She sprinkles finely ground cinnamon in a small, practiced swirl and places the cap back. Then she slides the gourd into a shallow bed of heated stones, tucks a blanket of leaves over it to keep the warmth even, and sits back to wait. Waiting in the garden is never empty. It is an attentive thing, the watch of a mind tuned to small changes. Lily hums the old tune her grandmother used to hum in the kitchen as a child, an unremarkable melody that hangs in time like the slow drip from the fountain. The gourd hisses a little. The terrace takes on a new depth of scent, warm brown and sweet like a room settling into evening. A figure appears at the far end of the terrace. Seamus, who has a way of arriving as naturally as the morning fog. He is wrapped in a coat that looks older than he is and wears a hat that has collected more than one story. He carries nothing but a folding chair and the sort of quiet presence that makes the garden feel slightly more like home. His footsteps are little more than a whisper on the stones. Lily stands to greet him, their hands touching briefly, an exchange of warmth between palms. "I thought I'd find you here," Seamus says, but it is less a question than a certainty. His voice is low and gravelled by years of coughing at wind and telling jokes to people who would not laugh. But the garden softens it, and even his laughter, when it comes, is small enough to be folded into a cup. "Early warmth for late bones," Lily answers, and this too is a ritual, the way they share a small joke, then fall into companionable silence while the gourd cooks. Seamus sets his chair beside the hearth, and the two of them sit, watching the steam braid itself into the air, watching the fairy lights blink in one slow, steady rhythm as the mist thickens around the terrace edges. A small kettle sings somewhere below, a sound that joins the fountains and becomes part of the tapestry. When the gourd is soft enough to give to the touch, Lily draws it out with gentle tongs and sets it upon a plate of veined stone. She slices it open. The steam releases like a memory folded open, the scent enfolding Seamus, who inhales as if tasting a page of his past. She hands him a slice, and they eat with warm, small spoons. The first mouthful is always the most sacred, the moment when all the careful tending and time gathers into a single, simple pleasure. The gourd's flesh is mellow and bright, the spice threaded perfectly through the oats and nuts, honey catching at the corner of the lips like a secret smile. Seamus closes his eyes for a second, the way people do when a taste reminds them of a story they have not yet told, and the sound of the nearby fountain rises and falls like a breath. They talk about small things and nothing at all. A seedling that refused to bloom, the way the mist collects on certain kinds of leaves, a child's laugh from a terrace below. Seamus tells a tidy, half-remembered tale about a boat that once came up the river with a crate of golden gourds, the sort of story that might be true and might be the way a person remembers hoping for things. Lily listens, and occasionally she tells him something she has learned in the quiet. How to tell the difference between the different hives by scent, which vine prefers the northern light, the exact time to pick a leaf so the bloom keeps its color for the winter. The conversation blooms like the garden, small, fragrant, repeating motifs of humor and tenderness. Afterwards, Lily clears the stones and sets them aside to cool. She rinses her spoon in a little basin where water moves in a slow, soothing circle. The ritual of tidy work settles her, and Seamus helps in that easy way friends have. One reaches for something the other needs without speaking. They fold the blanket away, reshape the vines that have drifted, and tie them back with soft rope. The terrace hums softly with the passage of affectionate labor. Then Seamus departs the way he came, with a small wave and the echo of an old song on his lips. Lily watches him disappear into the fog that swells between tears, and a small part of her mind returns to the day's list. Plants that need pruning, bulbs to press into the soil, a lantern glass to wipe. But she lets it wait a little longer. There are small memories she keeps wrapped inside the gourd's warmth. When she was a child, she learned to roast seeds in a pan with her grandmother's steady hand above hers. The old woman taught her patience by telling stories about tiny things, about how a seed knows when it is ready to open, how a vine will choose its own path if given the time. Lily remembers the smell of spiced cloths pressed between pages, and the way her grandmother would mark recipes with small, thoughtful notations, like, "For soft evenings," or "When the rain comes early." Those notes are in her pocket now, literal slips of paper kept safe, and they live as instructions and as talismans. They guide her hands in the terrace's soft light. The amber gourd terrace is not only about the food. It is the place where neighbors leave small gifts, a jar of preserved lemons, a folded scrap of music, a hand-carved spoon. These tokens are not grand. They are exactly the scale of belonging here. Today, a child from lower terraces leaves behind a little stone painted like a star, and wedges it into the sill where Lily will find it later. The stone will keep the place warm with its color until someone else notices it and smiles. She moves slowly through the terrace, touching leaves, rearranging a lantern so its light will fall on a path for later. The rain keeps whispering on the roof of vine, a steady thread that knits this long morning to the next. By the end of the amber gourd morning, the sun has drawn itself up like a blanket pulled back, and the terraces below are taking on the day's work. Lily pockets the small recipe slips and the painted stone, turns off the sunbox hearth, and takes a moment to stand in the doorway of the terrace and listen. The garden speaks in murmurs, the fountain's distant plash, the faint clatter of cups from a lower dwelling, the soft scuff of feet on stone. She breathes it in, counts its rhythms like a person counts a blessing, and then steps down the worn steps toward the hanging orchard. If this gentle walk brings you calm, a small like helps us keep sharing these stories. The hanging orchard lies 2 terraces down, where the air is syrup-thick with apple scent, and the ropes that carry the baskets are woven into patterns like old lace. Here, baskets hang at differing heights, each one a little world of its own. some lined with straw, some with bright leaves that catch the light, some tiny enough for a child's hand, some big enough to hold a neighbor's entire morning. The apples are not merely picked and left. They are tended, cradled, cored, and given fillings. Oats, toasted nuts, drizzle of cream, a scatter of preserved citrus, all arranged so that each bite is a small, complete thing. As Lily approaches, she can see steam rising from several baskets, where heat has been trapped to set fillings and sweeten skins. The orchard is a study in careful domestic magic. Little hearths tucked beneath each den, sun-warmed stones storing the day's heat. A system of cloths and rotors that tilt the baskets toward the embers when necessary. The bows of the baskets sway slightly with the passing of the mist, and the glow of the lanterns makes the apples look lit from within, as if small moons were caught in woven nests. Lily carries a corer in one hand, its handle smoothed by years of use. It fits comfortably into the hollow of her palm as if it had been made there. She selects an apple, red ripened, a little firm beneath the skin, and sets it in the cradle of a basket. The coring is a slow, satisfying process. She presses, twists, the little ring of flesh lifts out like the lid of a tiny cup. Into the hollow she lays oats gently browned in honey, a few toasted almonds crushed between thumb and forefinger, and a sliver of candied orange peel for brightness. She sprinkles a dusting of spice that is mostly nutmeg with a whisper of clove, and then she steadies the apple back into place as one would set a jewel into a setting. The basket is tied with twine that has been braided with thin strips of lemon peel, which will release their scent as the apple warms. As she works, Lily remembers another slow afternoon from years gone by. Her mother had taught her to core apples while a storm rained hard and fast outside, the kind of storm that makes the whole house lean inwards. They had sat by the hearth, two silhouettes bent over the same bowl, and the apple peels had curled like ribbons. Her mother had hummed low and steady. She had said that when you fill something with care, it takes the care into itself. Lily had not understood then why makers of small things say that. She understands now. The apple, when warmed, will carry that filling like a small promise. There is a rhythm to the orchard's tasks. Filling an apple, setting it in the basket, tying the twine, tipping the basket so its contents warm gently from below. A child runs past, bare feet whispering on the stone, and drops a folded paper kite into Lily's lap. A tiny note attached reads, "For winter, make a hope." Lily smiles, tucks the kite into her pocket. Children here know how to leave things to be found. Their small offerings are seeds planted in pockets to surface at the right cold day. The steam from the baskets rises and mingles with the mist, and the lanterns prickle the air like chilled fireflies. Someone below sings a half-remembered tune, and it drifts up like a scent. The orchard keeper, a quiet woman named Mara who lives in the terraces beyond, passes by with a tray of fresh curd and nods to Lily. They exchange a wordless sufficiency, the shared knowledge that each of them keeps certain hours and certain secrets. Lily lifts a basket of apples to a little low hearth where the heat glows without flames. The warmth slips into the skin, and the filling begins to set into a golden, sticky comfort. Rose arrives soon after, moving through the mist with her usual soft, determined step. She carries a parcel wrapped in cloth the color of new leaves, tied with yellow string. On the parcel's ribbon are little polka spots, green on yellow, that catch the lantern light and scatter it into specks. Rose's hands are always busy in some gentle work, mending a sleeve, binding a stem, folding a scrap of cloth into something new. And today, she is humming a tune that Lily recognizes from a winter dance years ago. Her presence draws the orchard into a warmer light, and Lily feels the familiar easing that comes when a certain friend appears, and everything seems in its right place. They speak in fragments, in the way of people who have been companions for a long time, about the right way to fold cloth for a canopy, about a child who prefers green apples instead of the sweeter kind, about a lantern glass that needs polishing. Rose sets her parcel down and their hands brush. She lifts the cloth and reveals, folded compactly, something that seems at once ceremonial and utterly ordinary. A length of fabric that will become a canopy for one small terrace, a green cloth with little yellow dots like miniature suns. Lily's chest loosens at the sight. The canopy is a promise of shelter, a small domestic miracle that will hang above a bench and make a place feel held. They work together to hang a new basket, choosing its place so that when the first soft snows come, the basket will be sheltered, and the apples inside will stay sweet. Rose and Lily laugh softly over the care of an overzealous vine that insists on twining through the twine, and they trade stories of similar stubbornness. The orchard listens. The mist folds around them like a shawl. Someone's voice from a terrace below calls up a question about borrowing a ladder. Someone else answers with the name of a person who is likely to have one. The commotion is small, poultry of conversation that does not disturb the fabric of the place. As they work, Lily thinks about the winter coming on slow feet, about how the orchard is now preparing the fruit not simply to be eaten, but to be stored as love. Each apple becomes a parcel for the cold months, a kernel of sun and communal warmth for later retrieval. She imagines, with a soft ache, the terraces buried under a hush of pale flakes, the lanterns glowing, and the hanging baskets lining up like a string of warm beads. The thought steadies her. She presses a thumb into a stray leaf, coaxing it away from the twine, and Rose watches, hands half full of twine and light, then reaches to help. They finish tying the basket and set it to warm, and Rose offers Lily a small cup of spiced cider from a flask she has in her coat. It is bright and a little tart, the steam mingling with the orchard's scent to make something almost like laughter. They sip, and for a while there is only the two of them, and the low, steady music of the garden. Fountains, fairy lights, the creak of rope. Rose unwraps her parcel fully and speaks, softly, about a little plan she has been harboring. An idea to place a new lantern at the orchard's far edge, one with glass that scatters color in soft specks, like the polka dots on her cloth. Lily thinks of the canopy, of the ways in which small shelters add up to a feeling of having a place in the world, and she nods. There is large generosity in such nods. It is a promise to be there for the small things that make days kind. As the afternoon deepens, a small breeze flows down the terraces, taking with it the smell of roasting seeds from the amber gourd side and a whisper of cocoa from further on. The air tastes of gathered things. Lily runs a hand along the basket's twine and wonders, briefly, about the gift Rose has brought, how it will look when hung, how the yellow dots will catch frost and shine like borrowed suns. She looks up toward the terrace where the fairy blooms stud their vine and thinks of Seamus's retired laugh, the child's painted star, the kettle's small song. The garden has, in its quiet way, busied itself into a tapestry of small comforts. There is a moment, as the baskets tilt toward their hearths, and the steam plumes above like soft flags, when Lily steps back and takes in the orchard as a whole. It is not a neat thing, not a perfectly ordered orchard. It is a living, leaning chorus of hands and scouts and small mistakes sewn into beauty. A vine has sent a tendril where it should not, wrapping around a lantern and making it look as though it were wearing a crown. A child has tucked a scrap of ribbon into a basket, and it will rattle there like a note when the apple is tapped later. These little misplacements make the place human, and Lily loves it for that. She thinks about how belonging accumulates, in shared spoons, in the way someone sets a cup down and another rinses it without being asked, in the laughing argument over whether the best apples are tart or sweet. They collect the finished baskets and string them along a sheltered rail, each one a bright, warm ornament. Children drift in, their voices muffled by the garden's soft acoustics, and they admire the apples and ask whose went into which basket. Lily and Rose answer in patient riddles and hand out small pieces for tasting. The orchard is a place of sampling and soft, necessary teaching. The children run off, trailing bits of steam and the sound of muffled laughter that the terraces swallow like a blanket swallowing warmth. As the day tilts toward the quiet of later afternoon, a faint hush settles. Not silence, but the sort that comes when many small tasks are finished and people gather their warmth. Lily lingers by a basket she has tied for a bench near the path, the place where those who have nothing left to do can sit and simply be held by the orchard. She thinks of how much of her life is made up of such small, careful placements. A basket tied to a rail, a stone tucked into a sill, a light hung where someone might need it come storm. These are the stitches that keep the garden from unraveling, and they are quiet work, the sort that invites no public praise, only the safe knowledge of being needed. Footsteps approach from the misty stair, a different pattern than Seamus, softer, quicker, and Lily looks up. The steps part the fog like pages being turned. The figure bears something wrapped in cloth, and for a second Lily's breath hitches. It is not alarm, only the familiar warm pang one feels when a neighbor arrives, not empty-handed, but with the small physical proof of attention. The figure emerges into the lantern light, and the polka-dotted cloth flashes a glint. Rose slows and smiles at the sight, and Lily's own smile fills her chest. The orchard listens as if waiting for the next line of a song. The figure's outline grows nearer still. The shape carries with it a quietness that suggests care, and the garden, as if knowing something, breathes a little deeper. Water trickles a touch louder in the fountain, as though to mark the moment. Lily moves forward to receive whatever is being offered, her hands open in the garden's language of receiving and giving. The mist thickens around them, making the small exchange feel set apart from the rest of the day, as if a private constellation had been hung for their eyes alone. The parcel in the cloth is light in the hands of the neighbor who brought it. Yet, when Lily takes it, her fingers feel the weight of the thought inside as though the gift were heavy with intention. Rose watches with a soft, steady smile, as if any small astonishment on Lily's face is exactly the thing she hoped to give. The mist seems to slope closer to listen. Lily unties the knot slowly, in keeping with the rhythm of the garden. She lifts the cloth, and beneath it rests something made to be folded and spread. A canopy of green, the yellow dots like small suns trapped in fabric, neat and warm as a folded leaf. It is the exact color of the moss steps back at Lily's front door. The polka dots like promises of light. For the bench by the path, Rose says, as if the sentence itself will smooth the bench's corner and make it a place worth sitting. For when you need a pocket of shelter. The words are small, but they settle on Lily like an extra shawl. She presses the fabric to her cheek as if to feel the weave of the gesture. Around them, the orchard breathes. Baskets rock in their slings. The steam from the apple hollows rises like tiny flags. A child presses her forehead to the rail and scrapes a thumb along a basket's rim, leaving a thin, bright print that will dry and sparkle. Someone in a lower terrace clinks a spoon against a cup. A delicate question answered by the kettle's low reply. They find a place by the path, where a bench has been patched more times than it has been painted, and work together to suspend the canopy. Rose holds the cord steady, while Lily tucks the ends with small knots learned from a lifetime of mending. The fabric hangs, and the yellow dots catch lantern glow in quiet, scattered spots. When the canopy is secure, Lily steps back and folds her hands. She feels in the lump of her throat the kind of fullness that is not loud. She thanks Rose with a simple look that contains in equal measure gratitude and the recognition of being seen. "It'll keep the rain away in a friendlier sort of way," Rose says, and the laugh that follows them is a soft, shared thing, a muffled bell that the mist carries into the terraces beyond. They leave the orchard at a slow pace, bundling a few warm baskets for those who will come home hungry, pressing strawberries preserved in lemon skin jars into pockets. The market at the lower terraces hums like a quiet stomach. Someone offers Lily a scrap of warm flatbread, which she accepts with the manners of someone who has always known that gifts here are measured in rounds of comfort rather than coins. She tucks the bread into a cloth and carries it like a token for later. The path leads them down between terraces where fairy blooms grow thick as whispers. The light here is low and the air is sweet with pollen, and Lily pauses beneath an arch of petals to tuck her hair behind an ear and watch the slow, inevitable movement of a spider-stitched web. A drop of water balances at its center and trembles with a small world inside. The repeated song of the fountains threads through everything. It is no louder than a thought and steadier than footholds. Constant water, water that remembers every other day it has known. They cross a thin bridge whose planks have a sigh in their grain, and the bridge's rope rails hold the damp of a morning that has not yet decided to be sun or to remain mist. The Garden of Babylon shifts in light as if it were a living book. Terraces turn their pages and new scenes open. Lily feels the garden as a companion who has learned to be generous with its own corners. She moves as a person who knows that small corners are often enough. Petal Grove waits ahead, and as they come upon it, the petals appear to hum in a tone that is almost like singing. This part of the garden has always been a kind of quiet reverie, a place where the botanical and domestic arts blur. Here, blooms glaze with crystallized nectar to become something close to ornaments. They hang from strings like glass candy and catch the lantern light and turn it into a soft, stained glass hymn. The petals themselves are thin as paper and tinted with subtle, edible dyes that draw bees for longer than normal rests earlier in the season. Now, as the air cools, the bees are fewer, and the petals' glow softens into a delicate, milky sheen. Lily moves among the benches where workstations have been laid out. Slabs of smooth stone for pressing, trays of spun sugar, bowls of clear syrup kept warm to the touch. Her hands glide over the tools she has arranged, instruments of patient craft. She takes a small spoon and dips it into a pot of nectar that gleams like liquid amber. The nectar has been reduced slowly over 2 mornings. It has the clinging quality of memory and the temper of a good story told well. Into shallow molds she brushes the syrup, a delicate film that will dry translucent and become the membrane of the petal. Each stroke is steady, the motion of a person who has done this many times, the grace of repetition. Children arrive in ragtag pairs and trios, cheeks wind-kissed, and eyes wide as if they have been storing wonder like winter fuel. They sit on low stools and watch as Lily shows them how to lay a petal on a board and press a sprinkle of pollen dust in a pattern that looks at once accidental and deliberate. A little boy, whose name is Thomas, who is known for collecting anything shiny, asks in a voice that is small but hopeful how the petals keep their glow. Lily replies with a line about the way light remembers where leaves have fallen, which is both a true answer and the sort of comforting poetry the children like. She lets them press sugar along edges, guiding their fingers so that the petals keep their fragile rim. An older woman from the terrace below, who is known to everyone as Aunt Mare, arrives with a basket of candied citrus rinds. She sets them down with the air of someone who knows what tends to a low fire. She tells a short story, one of those small, repetitive tales that stitch into the garden's life, about a winter when frost came early and the entire grove had to be wrapped in quilts until morning. The story is not long. A minute's warmth, a detail about a fox who stole a ribbon and was forgiven because it needed shelter. The children half listen and half play. They place the candied peel in a dish and return to their pressing. Lily dips a petal into the warm syrup and lifts it carefully to a drying rack where the breeze, slow and patient, will take up the task of firming it. The rack is a lattice of twine and small slats. The petals rest there like moths pinned to a gentle collector. Each petal becomes an ornament of memory. Some are brushed with crushed rose petals, others with ground almond that adds a soft bite. The work is slow. Lily hums the tune. She hums when roasting seeds and when preparing warm jars, the same line threading through the day like a seam. Families arrive in small waves, some carrying children, some with babies wrapped close in scarves. Their laughter is muffled by the petals and by the steady sigh of water. A child hides under a bench and emerges with herb sprig confetti for the petals. Another fashions a tiny crown of stems for himself and presents it solemnly to a visiting friend. Parents stand near the edges, exchanging folded words and brief smiles that speak of shared labor rather than showy declarations. The garden holds all of this: small offerings, small deceits, small mercies, and tucks them into its fabric. A woman named Elsie appears, carrying a tray of glass jars whose lids are topped with wax in cheerful shades. Inside are petal preserves and syrup lit with lemon sheen. She offers one to Lily. "For the nights that need extra brightness," she says. Lily accepts and presses her palm to the cool edge as if the jar itself were a small bell of good fortune. The petal party becomes an exchange of things that mean, more than anything, that people have been thinking of one another. Snow begins, imperceptible at first. Not flakes like knives, but more like soft dust from some far sponge. It arrives as if to test whether the petals will hold their glow. The dust rests on the edges and on the twine rails, and the lantern light refracts through it into tiny prisms. At first, the flakes are so fine that they sit like the breath of a long wait. Children clap their hands and make small guffaws of delight that the garden receives as if it were an old friend returned. Lily watches them and thinks about the winter ahead, about the way the garden will fold itself into denser quiet, and about how these bright petal ornaments will be kept for when the cold asks for cheer. The petal work slows as the light grows more wan. Older companions begin to wrap extra shawls around their necks. Lily hands a string of orchids to a small girl who has watched her with solemn concentration. The girl cradles the petals as though they were something to be saved for a big day. There are small missteps, petals that crack beneath a clumsy finger, syrup that runs thicker than intended, but these are folded into the afternoon's story with patience. A man who visits only in the mornings laughs softly at his own clumsiness and offers to mend a broken petal elsewhere with a line of spun sugar, which he does with surprising finesse. The children take turns watching, learning the ways of delicate repairs that are more craftsmanship than trick. In the petal grove, there is always someone who remembers a line of song that used to be hummed when the moon leaned over a bench. They start to sing, not loudly, but in a kind of communal whisper, and the voice flows from bench to bench, from terrace to terrace. Lily hears the tune and lets it carry her hands along. Her motions seem guided by the music, leisurely and precise. A memory slips over her then. A winter some years ago when her grandmother taught her to press tiny flowers between pages. She remembers the smell of old paper and lavender, the way the book had a deep indentation where the pressed petals were kept, like a secret groove. She remembers being told, in a voice that kept no hurry, that some things are best left to steady time. This memory warms the inside of her like the heat that has coaxed apples and gourds. She lets it lend its steadiness to her fingers. As dusk leans in more deeply, the petal lights, that collaborate lights and preserved petals, are strung along a railing. They cast a soft, mottled glow, and children run their hands along the lighted curve as if reading braille of warmth. Someone fetches paper lanterns, small and circular, and the elders teach the children how to hold them so that the flame is safe and the paper keeps its promise. A father tells his child that when you carry a lantern in the grove, you carry a piece of someone else's care. The child nods as if this were a fact akin to sunlight. The petal grove closes the day's day work with a quiet ritual. A shared cup of thin broth made from broth herbs and a smear of orange rind that cleanses the fingers. They sit in a loose ring and share, talking of small things. A book that might be worth reading, a troublesome ivy that refuses to be tamed, a neighbor's tiny triumph. Lily passes around a jar of petal preserves and allows each person a spoon. They taste like summer kept, and like afternoons caught in jars. The shared sip is soft, and becomes a kind of benediction. Night settles, and puffs the mist into thicker shapes. The fairy blooms, now slumbering, dim their light to reserve themselves for later. The petal ornaments look like pale moons hanging in a darkening sky. The children's laughter muffles, and they are taken home by parents who tuck them under cloaks and murmur good nights. Lily lingers a while to light a string of small lanterns that hang at the path's edge. Their glass made of many colors. The lights scatter against the snow-dusted leaves and make the path look like a soft, protective river. When she at last steps away from the petal grove, Lily feels as though she has walked through 2 entire days in one. There is comfort in the knowledge that the hours here are measured by handwork and by shared spoons more than by calendars. She moves down toward the lower terraces. The sound of water grows fuller as if approaching a larger body, and the smell of cocoa threads in from a distance. Warm, rounded, leaning into the sweetness of the evening. The cocoa fountain terrace rises like a promise that has been kept through many seasons. It is lower in the hanging sequence and wide enough to give an impression of a small courtyard. A central basin holds the fountain. This one a shallow bowl of dark stone, whose water tumbles in a slow, glossy ribbon. Around it grow compact cocoa trees, their leaves deeply furred, and their pods clustered in plump numbers. Under their canopy, a low hearth has been fashioned from old copper kettles and sunstones, with steam channels that carry warmth from deeper geothermal pockets the gardeners favor. The terrace smells, unmistakably and plenteously, of chocolate and citrus and warm almonds, and the scent presses against Lily's clothes like a friendly hand. The fountain itself is the garden's small miracle. A pool where melted chocolate circulates in a modest, decorative loop. A stone lip holds candied orange peel and crushed hazelnut ready to be dipped. The flow is slow and sensible, not indulgent. It is a place for sharing, for little pieces left in the mouths of neighbors rather than for ravenous feasting. Around the basin are benches carved of old vinewood and planked with woven moss, each one carved and smoothed by hands that have been careful over many winters. Lily approaches the hearth where a kettle hums beneath a lattice of steam. There are 2 large pots, one for dark, rounded chocolate ground from bean to paste, and another for milk and spice. The method here is an antique one of gentle coaxing. The pots sit over an even bed of warmth, the steam rising to form an embrace rather than a blaze. Lily stirs slowly, watching the chocolate turn glossy under her spoon, and adds a sliver of candied orange and a measure of roasted hazelnut. She thinks of the way chocolate changes with time, the dull, crumbly bar of raw beans that becomes a soft, yielding syrup under the right patience. She tastes with a small spoon, rolls a bead of warmth over her tongue, and adjusts the seasoning. A touch more salt, a finger snap of peppermint for brightness, a dusting of ground coffee for someone who likes the bitter to balance the sweet. Visitors drift in. Rose arrives, carrying a small trowel and a bundle of bulbs wrapped in newspaper. She keeps her hands busy. Planting is her way of talking. She sets the bulbs down, and they speak of placing them in the soil with intention. The right depth, the right spacing, so that come spring the terraces will have a surprise of green. Seamus appears too, his hat in hand, and a small wax-wrapped confection tucked into his pocket with the same reverence he gives to his folding chair. He sits by the fountain, and when Lily inclines a spoon, he offers his own tasting notes in the way that old friends do. A remembered childhood, a grandmother who once melted broken chocolate pieces in a bowl of steam to make a special treat for a winter dawn. There is far less hurry here than in a kitchen on market day. People come by and take a sliver of chocolate, swirl it along the lip of the fountain, let it melt, and then press their fingers to the underside of the cup to warm them. A small circle forms where conversations fold into remembrance. Someone recalls a time when a traveling confectioner came to the market and taught a brief trick for tempering chocolate over a bed of warm pebbles. Another tells of how once a child hid a ribbon in a cocoa pod, and the whole terrace took a week to find it because they enjoyed the search more than the trophy of discovery. Lily and Rose make small confections to share, little rounds studded with crushed cane sugar and nut bits. They pour the chocolate into wooden molds and top them with candied peel, pressed flour, and a tiny pinch of spice. The molds are laid on a tray that will cool in a shallow bath of stream water. Lily shows a young visitor how to scatter crushed hazelnut in a pattern so that no 2 are the same. They work with a sweet, companionable silence, punctuated by the sound of the fountain's small applause. A neighbor, known simply as Tom of the lower terrace, brings in a crate of oranges. He speaks in short bursts about the sudden luck of his grove that season and gives the terrace a shine with his bright fruit. The smell of citrus cuts the chocolate's weight and makes the entire terrace feel fresher. He offers slices to everyone, and the child Thomas, who has been following Lily most of the day, takes one and grins, sticky with juice. Lily hands Thomas a folded napkin and asks him to place the peel in a little dish near the fountain. The child, delighted by the sense of an official task, does so with exaggerated solemnity. Later, as evening deepens, Lily and Rose set a small unlit area near the fountain aside for what the neighbors have been planning. They have been working on a thing that feels too big to be simple. A lantern that is not merely a lamp, but a sheltering object. The plan was hatched little by little. Threaded glassworks from the corner glassmaker, the hand of a metal worker from 2 terraces over to fashion a stand. The hands of many to grind color into panes that would glow like the garden itself. It was not a secret kept from Lily, only a surprise tended with care. The neighbors had decided to honor the person who kept the terraces with such steadfastness. Seamus, in his customary way, shuffles to the center of the gathering and clears his throat with a small, polite cough. There is a hush that is not showy. It is the quiet attention one gives a person handing over something precious. Tom, from the lower terrace, lifts an old crate and sets it down with a creak that sounds like a preface. From the crate come lengths of woven cane, a ring of patinated metal, and, finally, a lantern whose glass panes are painted in soft green and scattered yellow dots like the canopy Rose brought earlier. The lantern is larger than any that usually hang along a path. Its light will be a pool unto itself. The glass is flecked with tiny speckles, like flecks of frost trapped mid-spark. Lily has not expected anything this large. She feels the gift as if someone has placed a handful of stars in her lap. The neighbors secure the lantern on its stand in the center of the terrace, and when they lift it into place, someone gives a small collective cheer that echoes around the basin and makes the chocolate ripple in tiny, delighted waves. Rose stands beside Lily and presses a warm hand into hers. "We thought the entrance needed a light," she says simply. "We thought you might like a place that says, very plainly, you are welcome." Lily's chest is heavy in a way that is both unfamiliar and not. She looks at the faces gathered around her. Tom, Mara, Aunt Mare, Elsie, the children with sticky fingers, Seamus with his hat in his hands, and feels an old, steady stitch in her heart unknot. There are no loud speeches, only small nods and a few words about how the garden keeps them and how they keep it. It matters as much that the gift is practical, one that will guide latecomers home, as it does that it is beautiful. They light the lantern together. The first flame is a hesitant thing that soon learns its strength in the glass, and the panes glow with a color that seems to be part canopy and part sunrise. The light scatters across the faces of those gathered, softening edges, lending their features a warmth that looks like a blessing. Someone murmurs a word, belonging, as if it were a recipe ingredient, and the word fits so naturally into the terrace's air that it becomes part of the garden's inventory. It is in this unshowy moment that Lily feels the crest of quiet emotion wash through her. The sort of wave that does not knock you over, but smooths out a small tense line from the brow and leaves the skin above the eyes softer. She looks at the lantern, and then at each neighbor in turn. She clasps her hands together, and, with a voice that is steady in its smallness, thanks them. She thinks of the canopy Rose had given in the orchard, of the stone star a child had left, of the many small favors stored in jars on shelves. She realizes, again and with more clarity than before, that the garden is a network of tiny debts paid and repaid in things that matter most in the cold months. A cup of broth, a mended shoe, a lantern to find the path. To mark the new light, they take the chocolate and make small nougats. Lily dips pieces into the pool and sprinkles them with pieces of citrus and candied hazelnut. Each one is wrapped in a square of brown paper and tied with string. She hands the first to Seamus, who takes it with his usual gentle care and offers a short, merry bow that says more than a speech. To Rose she gives the second with a laugh that sounds like the settling of a window in a cold house. Then she moves down the bench path, handing out the confections to neighbors, children, and folk who drift in with reasons trivial and tender. A lost key found, a roof mended, a child's tooth kept under a pillow. After the exchange of sweets, as the night deepens and the glow of the new lantern becomes a small sun for the terrace, Lily and Rose collect the gardening tools for the next day. They find a quiet moment to plant bulbs by the fountain. The soil here has been kept loose and warm, and they press each bulb in with the care of people tucking something asleep. They plant crocus and narcissus, small bright things that promise shock color in months to come. The bulbs sink into the earth like tiny, preformed promises, and Lily rests her hand on the soil as if to hold them steady until spring returns. There is a ritual in this, an agreement with seasons that feels nourishing. Plant now in the dark, and later accept brightness when it is ready. As they work in the garden's theater of night, small memories return to Lily. Of a lantern her father once placed by the back step when she was ill, and too small to understand why light mattered. Of a neighbor who once knit her a scarf that finally held together through a winter like a handshake. Each memory is a tiny, private treasure, and she sets them like seeds in a line beside the bulbs. They are not things to be told aloud. They are gentle ornaments for her mind. When the planting is finished, Lily takes a last turn around the terrace, making note of the places that will need a little attention in the morning. A path that could use a stone replaced, a small leak in a sunbox seam, a vine that would like a new guide stake. The list is not heavy. It is a map she carries in her head like a familiar poem. She tucks the trowel into its holder, wipes her hands in a cloth that smells faintly of citrus and chocolate, and stands a while by the fountain to watch the lantern's light scatter in the water. The pool catches the glow and makes it into a moving mosaic of green and gold. Somewhere in the distance a kettle sings, a small tenor voice among greater instruments. Seamus departs with his customary slow nod and a promise to return in the morning to fetch a bench he is borrowing. Rose stays a little longer, her hands still damp with soil, and together they walk back up through terraces toward the house that Lily keeps at the topmost level. The climb is gentle. Lanterns tilt and wink as the night breathes around them. The garden feels like a body with many small organs all working in unison. The fountain as heart, the terraces as ribs, the lanterns as small lungs drawing and releasing light. They reach Lily's doorway, where the moss steps slope into a shallow hollow of warmth. She sets the canopy Rose had brought earlier across the bench by the entrance, as if to test its newness in the place it was first imagined. Then she takes off her shawl and hangs it on a peg carved with tiny leaves. There is an economy of motion that comes with closing a day's work. A simple sweep of hand over a surface, the careful turning of a key that the gate knows by feel, the soft tapping of a closing latch. Before she hangs up the lantern for the night, Lily stands with Rose in the doorway and looks back over the terraces. The new lantern throws its light back up the path, tracing a safe, bright ribbon for anyone who might still come. The air is crisp, and the frost has edged the leaves with silver that looks like tiny calligraphy. Mist curls low, and the fairy blooms are just brave enough to keep a thin thread of glow. Lily feels profoundly and without self-consciousness as if she belongs to something far larger than herself and yet intimately near, the slow, frequent kindness of this community. Rose presses a small gift into Lily's hand before she goes, a jar of citrus peel-infused honey that catches the candlelight. For cold nights, she says. The phrase is both instruction and blessing. Lily fits the jar into a shelf in her kitchen and tucks her hands in for a second, as if to drink in the warmth. The house is quiet inside, arranged with the care of many small hands over years. Lily lights a single candle and lets it settle into a low dish. The flame bends in a room not yet completely dark, and she places the jar on the table beside a bowl of warm bread. She sets the newly received ribboned chocolate on a small plate and breathes in the honeyed citrus scent. Outside, the water keeps its patient music, a distant, unwavering sound that the house shares like a heartbeat. The lantern's glow at the terrace slips through the window and scatters on the floor like a pale tide. She goes about a ritual she does not always remember to perform when she is tired. She tidies the things that will muffle the morning's clatter and make the next day simpler. She folds the canopy's spare ties and leaves them in a pouch. She rinses a spoon and lays it to dry. She tucks a small painted stone into the pocket of her coat, a child's offering that she will keep close to the heart of her work. These actions, repeated through many evenings, are their own kind of prayer in the garden's economy. Practical, unglorious, and deeply sustaining. Before bed, Lily sits by the window and watches the lantern's light as it reaches toward the topmost terraces. The snow has thickened in a hush. Thin drifts curve in corners, and the fairy blooms seem to sleep under powdered sugar. The entire Garden of Babylon feels layered like a cloth folded with care, each fold catching and holding a different sort of warmth. She thinks of the day's small events, the custodies of gourds and baskets, the patience of petals, the swirl of chocolate in the fountain. And her mind makes tidy patterns of each, storing them where they can be reached on colder mornings. In bed, she tucks the canopy's fabric under her pillow as one tucks a note into a book. The fabric is soft and carries the faint scent of lemon peel twine and Rose's familiar undertone of lavender, an aroma like an old bookmark. Lily lies back and lets the damp of the day fall from her like excess shawls. The house creaks in the mild way houses do, settling around her. There is the steady hush, water in channels, the murmur of the lantern's flame, the distant echo of someone closing a door gently. As she closes her eyes, images roll through her mind like photographs slid in slow motion. Seamus laughing softly, the steam rising from the gourd as if it were a chorus of small ghosts. Rose's hands knotting the canopy cord. The children's sticky fingers at the cocoa basin. The petal ornaments shining like small moons. The new lantern casting a pool of green and gold that visitors will find by night. Each image is edged with the garden's signature sounds. The water, the fairy light clicks like a string of tiny bells, the creak of a gate, the kettle's dim song, repeated like a refrain so the mind knows it's safe. She breathes in the scent of citrus, cocoa, and warmed spice. Her breath becomes a rhythm that matches the garden's steady music. The mist across the terraces smells of wet stone and softened leaves. It reaches even to the window of her small house and draws a cool, comforting film across the glass. Lily lets the day fold into itself. The work done, the gifts accepted, the community's promise renewed in small handmade things. Outside, the lantern's light dips and lifts in the breeze, making the shadows of leaves lace the path like old handwriting. The fountain runs on, untroubled by the night's other business, its sound as continuous as a vow. Little creatures tuck themselves into the garden's stitches. Birds roost in the hollow of an old beam. The neighborhood's voices have reduced to a pleasant hum, the sort that suggests someone is stirring porridge or telling a story to a child in a dim room. These sounds are not intrusive. They are the soft punctuation with which the garden closes the day's sentences. Lily's last thought is one of thankful steadiness. She thinks of the lantern again, how it will guide feet, how it will stand as a small sign that someone looked and saw and decided to put in effort, not for show, but for company. She imagines, in the way that people do when they are blessed with a sense of enough, that tomorrow will ask for simple things: pruning, stirring, listening near a bench. She smiles without opening her eyes, a small private smile. The water keeps its glassy voice. The fairy lights blink, one by one, into a lullaby. The garden wraps around Lily's house like a quilt. The mist settles on the canopy above the bench, and the yellow dots collect little prisms of frost. Somewhere, a child's breath becomes a steady rhythm in sleep. A dog snores in a comfortable octave. The lantern's glow becomes a single, slow blink, then another, as the flame's life eases into rest. And so the Garden of Babylon hangs, terraces folded like the pages of night, and the small lights and slow waters make a story that requires no telling. It is a story composed of kind hands, of food gently prepared and shared, of gifts given and received. It is a story of belonging that asks for no large proof. If you enjoyed this quiet walk, you may follow for more gentle journeys and return whenever you wish. Sleep now, carried by the sound of water like spun glass, and the last lantern flicker that will keep watch until morning.